Jason England, thanks so much for joining me here on the Penguin Magic Podcast and letting me record in your beautiful gambling museum in your home. This is an amazing. This is any card guy's like just dream den here.
I understand. You're welcome, and it's good to see you again.
Oh yeah, you too. We had a really great time at Max East, and you and Arpaul gave a really great talk on Erdnase. And but you wanted to show me some cool gambling stuff in here, and I want to start with this right over here. This pretzel is kind of an interesting story.
Okay.
Where did that pretzel come from?
So I don't want to say his name because he might still be working, but there is a hustler that I met over a decade ago who specializes in sort of small pool room and bar scams.
Yeah.
And one of his favorites was a version of Titanic Thompson's throwing a walnut over a building hustle from the 1920s, 1930s. So this guy had a bar pretzel made out of essentially lead.
It looks really great.
It's actually made out of solder. He makes them himself, and then he has an artist friend of his that paints them to look just like a bar pretzel. And in fact, if you put it in with a bowl of bar pretzels, it's tough to pick out.
Yeah.
The one he actually uses has little crystals of salt that they would apply to it while the paint was wet, so it looked even better.
Yeah.
This demo piece
that one
I have
looks pretty good.
Yeah, this one looks pretty good, but it doesn't look perfect because those pieces of salt aren't on it. But I tell you what, he showed me his with the little salt pieces on it. It looked fantastic.
You were telling me some of them would have like a bite out of them as well?
Yeah, so his actual one, he had it made so that it looked like a bite had been taken out of it.
Yeah.
And then he would break a piece of a real bar pretzel off and sort of glue it into that space so that he could take a bite out of the pretzel right before he threw it.
Oh, that's such a good sales job.
Really great, yeah. And so what he would do is, so he had this crazy story where he would go into a bar, he would pretend to be drunk, and he would start talking about how he was a pitcher in high school, and he could throw, some preposterous speed, 107, 108 miles an hour, which everyone knows is ridiculous. I mean, best pitchers in the major leagues break 100. It's been a great day for them.
Yeah, it's usually around 80, 90.
Exactly. I mean, a 99 mile an hour fastball is crazy fast, and so to get up 107, 108, everybody knows he's lying. He's full of it. He's drunk. And so he insists that he can throw anything, and he eventually settles on a bar pretzel. He says, I could throw this pretzel across the building, across the street, over the building across the street. And he would have an outside man who was actually typically his girlfriend who would say, no, you can't. I'll take that bet for $50 or whatever. And what they were trying to do, of course, is to get other people around them to go, Jesus, this guy's really going to take this bet. Let me have some of that action. I'll take $20 of that.
Yeah.
And so he would get this big pool, and he says you usually wouldn't actually do it unless you get $300 or $400 up. And then he would go outside with his bar pretzel and sure enough, throw it across the street.
Yeah.
And now what people didn't realize is he had gone over behind that building earlier and taken a bar pretzel and slammed it on the ground so that there's pretzel pieces back there.
Yeah.
And
so it's sort of, because once you get over there, you don't want them to like pick up the lead pretzel.
Yeah, they're not. Well, what's crazy is they'll never find it because not only does it go over the building, but it goes even farther than that.
Yeah.
And so
it's amazing how far you can
roll. Yeah, it would hit and roll another 50 or 60 feet, and no one would ever find it. And so they go back there, they see the pretzel pieces. And he said a lot of times people would just see it go over the building and they wouldn't bother to check. They just thought, wow, this guy really can throw, He gets paid. And then, of course, they get out of there before anyone. Yeah. It's not like they hung around for another 3 hours waiting for someone to figure this out.
You win a bar bet like that with that much money, you're going to run away and celebrate.
Exactly. You would take off. So that was his thing. And he gave me a couple of his pretzels years ago. He also used to make different types of weighted items. He would fill acorns and peanuts and walnuts with lead and stuff like that. So this is one of my favorites. And he also had, I think, a cheese ball. I forget. It's like the little round Cheetos cheese ball. He had one of those that he had somehow managed to fill with lead and keep it intact. So it was a real cheese ball filled with just enough lead And what would happen is that thing he would throw, and he didn't have to put a cheese ball behind the building because when it hit, it would shatter. So anyway, just kind of interesting.
Now, he also made that Mexican jumping beans next to it.
Yes. So, you never know. Someone won't go for the pretzel toss. You get a different game going. So for people from that might be listening to this that didn't grow up in the South like you and I did, a lot of people probably don't know that we went to the same high school.
Yeah, no, which is, I found that out. Some interview, you mentioned Farragut High School. You and I went to the same high school about 10 years apart or so. I think we figured it out.
Yeah. So
Farragut High School is known. We're also looking forward to them producing other card magicians. That's just sort of what you do when you're an admiral.
Chris Moneymaker, who won the 2006 World Series of Poker, went to Farragut High School.
Right.
Yeah. As did some of the guys that were writing on the show Reno 911. I forget which one, but one of those guys went to Farragut.
It's a hot, humid place, so we have to do something to entertain ourselves. But so we got Mexican jumping beans.
So what
here.
Mexican jumping beans are, for people that didn't grow up in the South, may not know what they are, is they are a little bean of some type. I don't know the exact type of bean it is, and a little worm crawls inside the bean, sort of burrows its way in there, and while that worm is sort of in its chrysalis phase inside the bean, it moves. It wiggles around, and it sort of moves very sharply. It's not like a slow caterpillar. It kind of jerks. And so what happens is in gas stations throughout the South, often you can buy these little Mexican jumping beans, they call them. And they're just something for kids to look at for a couple of days until the worm crawls out and flies away or whatever. And so what would happen is these guys would buy these Mexican jumping beans, and then they would take a piece of pool chalk and they would draw a little circle, a couple of inches in diameter on the table. And I would put my bean in the circle and you put your bean in the circle, and we watch them until one bean wiggles its way out of the circle. Whoever wiggles its way out first wins. And you could bet on this. So this guy, he had a metallic Mexican jumping bean made that is actually ferrous. It's magnetic. And he would have a little magnet on his knee, and underneath the table in the pool hall or bar or whatever, he would just have to get his knee close enough so that the magnetic field would allow him to wiggle this little Mexican jumping bean out of the circle, and he would win.
I wonder, how good does that look when you're moving the magnet around?
It's a good question. I probably don't have a magnet strong enough here to move this from all the way under the table. He had a pretty good, 3-inch diameter, like a neodymium speaker magnet or something like that. But I mean, it is magnetic. I've tested that part before. But I don't really know what it looks like. But then again, I don't know what a Mexican jumping bean wiggling its way out of a circle looks like either. So I don't have a frame of reference to know if it looked good or if it just looked okay.
I sort of wonder if the shape would actually help it, because it's sort of rounded on the back. It is round,
So if he just sort of got it wiggling, I think when he removed the magnetic field, the bean is going to continue to sort of rattle and settle a little bit. So anyway, that was just kind of it's just a crazy story more than anything. I don't know if he ever, made a lot of money with this, if it's something he did twice in his whole life. I know the pretzel thing he did hundreds of times. The Mexican jumping bean could have just been something he came up with. And he's the type of guy that, he might not have invented the Mexican jumping bean game. He might have walked into a bar one day where they were already playing that and realized, hey, there's an opportunity. Let me go figure out how to beat this, And so then he comes back a month later with his magnetic Mexican jumping bean.
The next thing, though, that is same guy made, and these are because I know that we're going to talk about some fun gambling stuff later. I mean, this is all gambling stuff. It's like bar bets and stuff. But this is the craziest looking contraption I've ever seen. It's for our listeners who have not seen any of the video that we're taking. It's a little square thing with 2 quarters in it, and it looks kind of spring-loaded and like it's held together with chewing gum and fishing line. But what the hell is that, Jason?
Okay, so this particular guy is sort of famous for controlling the outcome of coin flips. And so he has a variety of different mechanisms that he could conceal on his person. Some of them were in his shoes. Some of them were in the palm of his hand, maybe under his hat, that sort of thing. And they all held 2 quarters. One of them was heads up and one of them was tails up. And so what he would do is he would, so you kind of have to know a little bit about the culture of pool halls in this country, where lots of illegal underground gambling goes on. Obviously, they're gambling on the pool games, but a lot of times, gamblers, these guys, they pride themselves on their. They pride themselves on the fact that they'll gamble on anything.
They do side bets all over the place.
And crazy bets where there's no edge. I mean, there's no edge to betting on a coin flip.
Yeah.
But these guys sort of would pride themselves for just having the guts to bet $1,000 on a coin flip. I mean, who's crazy enough to do that? Well, these nutty gamblers are crazy enough to do that. So what he would do is he would get in there and he'd play pool and he would say, you guys don't have any gambling. I got more gamble in me than any of you guys. I'll bet $1,000 on a coin flip. None of you idiots are willing to do that.
Yeah.
And so he would kind of get these people riled up. And then obviously there's, the guy over in the corner that's got super deep pockets. He comes up and says, I'll bet $1,000 on a coin flip for you. And now it's on, and of course, if he can't get it on in that bar, it didn't cost him anything but 5 minutes of his time. He goes on to the next bar, tries it again. But eventually he gets it on.
And the real skill in this is not necessarily like figuring out how to cheat the game. It's figuring out how to get people into the bet itself.
Exactly. And it's having this crazy character so you seem believable.
Yeah.
And it helps that he was, a real pool hustler. So he sort of has that vibe and that brain of his going on anyway. So anyway, he's got this little device, and like you said, he sort of described it for people not seeing the video. It's about 1.5 inches by 2.5 inches long. It is made out of brass, and it's got springs and levers and buttons and a little alligator clip on it. And the alligator clip would clip to his ring that he wore on his hand.
Yeah, because it's sort of set so that it looks like it could clip to a wedding ring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so what happens is if you throw a coin, above a bar top, so imagine flipping a quarter above a bar top and then slamming your hand down on top of that quarter. So you have two problems. A, you have to get rid of the real quarter that you just flipped through in the air. You got to get rid of that somehow. So he had mechanisms using sticky material that would pick that quarter up. It would lift it up off the bar. Okay. And so that quarter's now gone. And now he just has to drop the quarter that wins for him. So he'd let you call in the air. He'd flip. You call tails. He slams this thing on the bar. And you hear a metallic thunk under there. You think that's just a quarter hitting the bar, or maybe his big watch hitting the bar. You don't realize that it's this metallic device in his hand actually hitting the bar. But if the music's playing and stuff like that, it sounds
fine.
Hear
it anyway.
So he picks up the quarter you actually flipped. And now he can drop either the heads quarter by doing nothing, or he can drop the tails quarter by pressing a little button as he slams his hand onto the bar, presses this little button, this little protective bar of metal slides over onto the other coin and protects it from coming out. Because the last thing you want is to flip one coin and raise your hand and there's two of them there.
Yeah, like rolling a 3 the hard way with dice or something.
Exactly. Well, it's like having a fifth ace show up in your poker hand. It doesn't look good. And so he's able, in essence, he's able to drop either a head or a tail and pick up the coin that you flipped all at the same time. And what's funny is he says this was a lot easier before state quarters. Because you can't flip a Wisconsin and turn over a New Jersey if they're paying attention, Back in the days where every quarter looked the same, it wasn't that big of a deal. So he had this device. He also had them built into flip-flops. So his right foot dropped heads and his left foot dropped tails. And a lot of times he would build that up as if it's super fair. We're going to let this coin hit the floor.
Yeah.
So he'd flip it. It would hit the floor. He'd stomp on it after he heard your call. And he'd say, all right, $1,000 for tails, right? And he's basically he's coming up with an excuse for stomping on it. Let me see the money. I don't believe you got $1,000. You got it? Okay. Let's see. What'd you say? Tails? And he lifts his foot, and sure enough, it's heads.
Yeah.
And that's because his flip-flop has picked up the coin you really flipped, and it's dropped, the opposite of whatever you called.
It's a really wild-looking device, and I love all of the psychology going into how it works. And even if it doesn't work, the story of how it works is a great scam on its own.
So, I've often wondered, because, as we've been sitting here, we've been playing with this, and I've shown you that clearly it works in the sense that you push the button, the parts move and all that.
Yeah.
I've often suspected that maybe this one didn't work all that well, and that's why he gave it to me. And the one he kept works much better, you know, because this is a guy that, you know, can't afford to give stuff away. So the fact that he gave me this tells me maybe it's a prototype, or it was one that just didn't work great. But obviously it does do.
Oh, it totally functions.
You know. Oh, and by the way, I didn't even show you this. So this button on the bottom, what would hit the bar top, that actually is what kicks out the coin.
Oh, wow.
So it is actually holding the coins in fairly tightly until it's time to propel them outwards. I got to reset this guy, but he just sort of sits in there and won't come out until the button hits the bar top.
It's a really ingenious little device.
And then out it comes. Yeah, it's very, very cool.
Yeah. And super intricate, too.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, this guy, I mean, he just obviously, I mean, the bottom of it looks like, so if anyone's can't see the photo of this, it looks like a crazy piece of clockwork sort of on the inside. Yeah. So anyway, that's what that does.
It's like a steampunk coin wallet almost.
Absolutely. And same thing with the Mexican jumping bee. You know, this one's not painted. It doesn't look like a jumping bee. It looks like a piece of brass. So I often suspect that maybe this one was his prototype, or he made a half a dozen of them, and this is just a spare he had lying around. But, you know, I'm not after the devices as much as I'm after these great stories.
Oh, yeah. The stories behind those are great. Now, let's move on a little bit. Okay. We're not going to do the gambling stuff yet. You have had this out on the poker table. This is a very neat thing. It's called the Beehive. And for anyone who hasn't seen this, it looks like if you were like building a flea circus like cage almost. There's a little cage on top with a little wooden spindle in the middle. And then there's like a metal corrugated plate around it. And a ball goes into it. I think that you can actually hear the noise. Oh, that sounded really great on the thing. Yeah. So this is a carnival game?
It is. It is a gaffed carnival game. So it's gimmicked. It was used to cheat the public. And, you know, the heyday of a machine like this would have been in, probably the 20s, 30s, 40s, maybe even into the 50s.
It does look like something that's like straight out of like a 20s movie or something like that.
Absolutely. So I often tell people, you know, imagine the classic Tweety bird cage that you saw in the cartoons. Yeah. Imagine you chopped the top off of one of those and stuck it onto a wooden cone and then stuck the wooden cone onto like a hubcap. Yeah. And then mounted the whole thing on a big square board. That's sort of what we're looking at here. You drop the ball bearing into the top, it hits the wooden cone, and it goes out one of, I don't know exactly how many are here, either 36 or 38 slots. And the way the operators would do, or what they would do is they would take, so imagine back in the days when 25 cents was a decent amount of money, you know, like $1 or $2 would be now, for playing a carnival game anyway. And they would take like a piece of candy, which cost a penny. They would put it next to a pack of gum, which costs 5 cents. And then the next prize around the perimeter of this would be a $1 bill. Hey, you're risking a quarter to win $1? That's kind of cool. And then a piece of candy and a pack of gum and another $1 bill. And then a piece of candy and a pack of gum and maybe a $5 bill would be the big prize. Yeah. And this would go all the way around the perimeter, almost like, think about it like a roulette wheel, how it has all those different pockets. Yeah. And so you walk up. The operator demonstrates the game to you. He shows that the ball sometimes comes out on a slum prize, like a piece of candy, but sometimes it comes out on the $1 prize. And then he says, I'll give you 5 plays for $1. You hand him the $1, he hands you the ball, and he walks over to the other side of the booth and just stands there while you play. And you'll never win. No. And the reason you can't win is that the psychology of this item is pretty interesting, is he actually has to cheat to show you the game is fair. But it is naturally gimmicked. So if he walks away from it, that's when the gimmick mechanism turns on. And he actually has to turn the gimmick off to show you the game operates legitimately. So when he's close to you, letting you drop the ball in, he's pushing a little button on the side of this board, which is hard to see, but he just pushes that in while he stands there. And so while he's demonstrating the game to you, everything works normally. The minute you hand him your $1, he hands you the ball and he walks away from it. And the beautiful psychology there is most people think that if if the carnival operator is hovering over you, that's when they're doing something sneaky.
Yeah.
And that's when the gaff is in operation. And this is a cool device because it's exactly the exact opposite. It's actually gaffed when they're not doing anything.
Yeah, and the little gates are really well designed, because when Jason first showed it to me, I suspected that some of the gates were closed and some of the gates were open, and I was sort of like looking up underneath it and couldn't see it, looking over on the top, and there's like only one very slight angle where I could see something moving, but even then you had to be pushing the button and I had to be like at a crazy angle to see it.
Yeah.
And it is, I mean, and it really is like almost, you know, country roulette is a great way.
Yeah, that's actually a great way of putting it.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to have to call it that from now on.
Yeah.
So what's cool about this is that I don't just let you lose 5 times in a row and call it a day.
Mm-hmm.
So what these guys would do is this would have been the kind of game that you would find in what's called an alibi joint. And an alibi joint is any carnival game where every time you lose, I explain why you lost. And so what they would do is they would show you, they would take the ball and they would they'd push the button on the side so it's operating fairly now. They would spin the ball and they'd put a little spin on it. That was not doing anything.
Yeah.
But they'd put some spin and say, oh no, you got to put a little spin on it like this, or put some back spin on it so that it falls out the one closest to you. That's where the $5 bill is. And so now you're trying to spin this ball bearing, which isn't doing anything at all.
Yeah.
But now when you lose, they have a reason for why you lost. Oh, you spun it too hard. Try it again. No, go the other way. Not like this. Clockwise, not counterclockwise. And so they have all these reasons why you're losing that are, of course, that it doesn't mean anything. That's not really why you're losing. You're losing because it's gaffed. But these alibi joints, they would explain to you, apparently, why you were losing at the game and give you things to, quote unquote, correct in your technique. That didn't do anything at all, of course. It's
sort of like those like magic tricks that actually get better with repetition. Like even though we're not supposed to repeat a magic trick, this is definitely one of those where you're like, I can easily see you giving me advice on this, and me just getting super frustrated at not winning.
Yeah, well, we've got a couple of things in here. You know, a lot of carnival games actually have the this reverse psychology where the game is actually fair only while I'm standing next to it, so I can show you that it's fair.
Yeah.
And the minute I get away from it, it's now not fair at all. The famous Razzle game, which I have up there. Famous Razzle game, I have to actually cheat you in order for you to win a little bit, so that by the time I stop cheating in your favor, the game now operates normally, and it's impossible to win on the square.
Yeah.
So it's one of those funny situations where I'm actually cheating on behalf of the player to set the hook in their mouth.
Yeah.
Once that hook is set, I start doing everything perfectly normally from that point on, and now you'll never win.
I mean, my favorite carnival game in here that is that the hoop and the hoops with the block where you have to drop it perfectly on there, and the only way it works is just you sit there and do it for 8 hours a day.
Exactly. If you work on a midway 8 hours a day, you can learn to do that, and then the minute you hand it to the sucker walking up to you, unless they've worked a midway for 20 years, they just can't do it. You know, it's just one of those things where it's not gaffed in the true sense of there's something wrong with it. It's just so hard to do that only a person that does that all day long, day in and day out, is ever going to be able to pull it off. The spot-to-spot game is a perfect example. Spot-to-spot is mathematically possible, and if you know the correct placement of those little zinc covers, you can cover up the giant red dot with 5 of those little covers. But if you don't know the secret, and if you haven't practiced for 8 hours a day for a whole summer, you're never going to pull it off. You're going to drop the first disc down. It's going to be wrong, and you've instantly lost. You just don't know it yet, you know. It's another really great old gaffed carnival. Oh, not even gaffed, but an old great carnival game that functions as if it were gaffed, but it's actually not gaffed at all, which is why you can occasionally still see that game in carnivals, because I could successfully argue to the local sheriff or the local politicians, hey, that game's not rigged. Here, I'll even teach you how to do it. It's not rigged at all. And it really isn't rigged. What's rigged about it is it's so impossible unless you practice all day long.